It's time for some rare insight into Raid Shadow Legends. Hello everyone, Bront, CatHerder here. We're having some fun talking Raid Shadow Legends, and this is going to be a medium rare video about rares. We are going to be making all kinds of rare jokes, food jokes, well, okay, maybe just food jokes. But regardless, we are going to be in some rare air here as we are talking about some really interesting rares. Generally, the idea of this video is to talk about some of the rares that I think are worth a second look. Some of them are going to be rares that are just kind of be okay for some progression. Some are very good for early to mid faction wars. Some are going to be late game faction wars even, and some are going to be end game secret room rares that you can use for all kinds of cool stuff. I'll highlight a couple of them. Some of them are going to be the obvious examples, and some of them are going to be ones hopefully you either haven't heard of or just haven't heard a lot of hype about. But I figured this would be a good, accessible video. I still use rares on my main and my end game teams occasionally. Every once in a while, I'll break one out even in a hard faction wars area, because sometimes a rare just brings the right buffs or debuffs or whatever I need for that particular room. And it's nice to have some of these rares built up, ready to go. Honestly, some rares are just so good that they're better than a lot of the epics in the faction, or at least better in the places where they are usable at. So I'm hopefully going to be in rare form for this video, but how about you guys? You guys going to be in rare form? Let me know some of your favorite rares before we get into this and see if some of your favorite rares match up in this video. I was kind of surprised that this video ended up being a let's talk about some of my favorite rares in each faction, but I think that was a great format to talk about, to not only show some of the highlights, but I think for early faction wars, it can be very good to figure out which rares are worth investing in, that you will maintain some value into the late game, either in Centranos or in Cursed City floors, or just in general being able to use them all the way through stage 21 of normal faction wars. It is so great to see some amazing rares in this game. It is actually, refreshing to see that not every champion has to be a legendary to fill a role. So let me know down below which one of your favorite rares, and then hey, we'll see if some of these things match. And while you're at it, why don't you hit that like button and hit that subscribe button. I've got a wonderful community, and it's all because of you guys. So let's keep on making the channel great, and let's have some rare comedy with rares. Now, the plan is not necessarily to go through every faction and highlight one rare, but I'm certainly going to see if I can a little bit. Valerie is one you actually get for free early on, and she is pretty solid for a rare. She's certainly not going to be absolutely endgame viable, but she's actually usable in the Wixwell teams because she is one of the few champions that can extend the duration of all buffs on a 3-turn cooldown. So that in and of itself makes her a very good champion to have. She also has a shield and then can actually heal people based on the number of buffs they have as well, which in a faction that doesn't actually have a lot of healing can be very, very good for faction wars. So the shield can certainly help keep people alive. Shield depends on her level, which means it's not a great shield, but this heal, according to the number of buffs they have, well, the Bannerlords bring the buffs. So from that perspective, you're going to get some pretty chunky heals on this. Unfortunately, it is a 5-turn cooldown. Really, this is her standout skill. Although again, if you need the healing, even a 5-turn cooldown, some healing is better than nothing. So Valerie, not necessarily going to be an end game for you, but could be very helpful. Now, there's a couple of fairly obvious ones in the High Elves, but I actually want to bring Selena Nightcloak up as one of the ones I don't think gets enough love. She is actually really, really good, and what it is she's one of the few rare burners in the game. So she puts increased attack on herself, meaning she's actually easier to build for early game than normal. Yes, she is a void rare, so you're certainly going to have a harder time getting her than a normal rare, but HP burn is usable in all kinds of areas. If you don't have any other burners, I know very early on I actually used her for the Frost Spider in some Centranos floors on my free-to-play. Very, very good. She has a chance to increase the duration of HP burn debuffs as well, which means she can pair with other HP debuff champions with an AoE that also does a decent amount of damage as well. So she's got some usability there. She got an A1 that heals herself based off of if they've got HP burn, it heals even more, makes her very, very good at staying alive. Finally, she gets a 5% turn meter every time HP burn is activated. So even if you're not going to use her for this HP burn, which, only gets out, up to 3 of them, she can actually be really useful as a burn extender, and she doesn't have to own these burns to get this turn meter. So she can actually cycle around pretty quickly on a 3-turn cooldown on Spider, for example, and keep burns up nearly indefinitely, as well as just doing some extra damage with that AoE. I did a whole video on Templar on my free-to-play series. If you want to check that out, I'll try to remember to link that up above there. But it is the one with the Indiana Jones ripoff. It is the Templar of Doom video. And, because I couldn't resist the pun. I mean, really, who could resist a pun that good? Regardless, we have Templar here. He is a farmable rare who's actually pretty good as well. He gives you the ability to put block damage on himself on up to a 3-turn cooldown. He can place Provoke randomly at times, and of course the block damage means the Provokes will generally bid up against nothing. Basically, he also gets his default skill for free whenever he gets a debuff on him, so he can actually pump out some okay single target damage. He's got decreased speed on him as well, and he does damage based on defense. What's kind of nice about him is with this block damage ability, he can be built to solo Bommel. It's going to be a manual run most likely, unless you can speed tune it exactly. The ability to have this farmable rare beat Bommel, and honestly, if you make him tanky enough to beat Bommel, he will actually also be tanky enough to beat the Scarab King for a couple of the floors as well. So that will be very good utility for an early game account. I 6-starred this dude, and he was very, very helpful for me in a lot of areas. And honestly, even in Faction Wars, yes, he didn't do a lot of stuff. He did some okay damage because he had War Master on him for the boss. Generally, his role was to sit there, take some hits, and stay alive, and he does that really, really well. So it looks like we are going to be going faction by faction and talking about a useful rare in each faction, and I'm not going to pick the obvious ones if I can avoid it. And of course, the obvious one in this is War Maiden. War Maiden is really, really good. Don't get me wrong, even in 2025, it is worth having a War Maiden built on your team because she can be useful not only for faction wars, is she really, really good, even in the hard faction wars in some cases if you don't have a better decreased defense champion, but she is good for a lot of the endgame secret rooms. And if you build her, she's an easy champion to throw in a bunch of places where you have limited availability on your roster for a decreased defense champion, especially if you can put her in some decent stun gear. She can also bring some AoE stuns as well as her decreased defense. Very, very good utility for a lot of people. But Sentinel here, he is really, really good rare for the HP secret room, for rares only. And part of it is because he does some decent damage. I mean, yes, he does damage based on attack here, so attack and defense. So I guess the damage isn't going to be great. But what he brings here is he brings an AoE, the heal reduction and the decreased attack are nice to keep you, alive in general. But he heals himself by 10% of his HP at the start of the turn. So this heal can be critical too, which I guess is the only other critical heal. In fact, I didn't realize this heal could be critical. This is the only other heal that can crit other than apothecaries, actually. So that's kind of cool. 10% of his HP is not a huge heal, but it means that he keeps himself alive, possibly in a room where you may not have other healers. And meanwhile, this A1 provoke can be very, very good. It has to be critical, so you want to build him for some damage in some way, shape, or form. But as an HP-based champion, he doesn't do a lot of damage based on HP, so you might build him for just attack damage anyway to hit and do some decent damage. But he's available in HP secret rooms, which can make him very usable as well. Early on, he can also be a good rare to just have on your team for faction wars and just general progression, because again, healing himself, you don't really need to worry about keeping him alive too much. He's also got a good amount of HP for a rare. Yes, he's super slow, but he's a rare. It's what you get. But he can be very good overall utility for your account early on, and in late game, he's got a room in one of these secret rooms. Now, in Ogryn, they've got a couple of good rares. Bellower certainly deserves a mention. You'll hear about Bellower a lot, but Gear Grinder is another one to look out for, especially in a faction that really is kind of lacking in revivers. Gear Grinder is a good reviver for a rare, but he also brings healing as well, which I think makes him a very good reviver to have overall on your account. I have had him be the key champion in faction wars on multiple teams I have built for the Ogryn. Basically, this revive ally 50% HP, 50% turn meter on a 5-turn cooldown. Yes, it's a 5-turn cooldown, but the 50-50 is a pretty good standard revive for most champions, and a lot of epics have this on a 4-turn cooldown. So for a rare on a 5-turn cooldown, it's not too bad. He's also got a decent amount of HP. For a rare, his speed is not absolutely horrible. He's got a 25% HP aura in crypts, which means he's actually got a usable aura for your faction wars if you don't have a good one. And he's got a 15% of their max HP heal that can get booked up with a couple of extra percentages right here and brought to a 3-turn cooldown. So he brings healing for your team, which gives him a lot of extra utility as a reviver. So you're not just bringing him because he has the revive. He can try to keep your team alive as well, give him the extra HP with that aura, and then he will heal himself if this attack is critical. So if you actually can spare the crit rates and get him to be able to hit critical, he'll try to keep himself yourself alive with some continuous heals as well. Now, Metal Shaper has got a very, very niche use, but for people that are struggling against the Scarab boss, Metal Shaper can be an absolute amazing champion. There are a lot more ways now to deal with the Scarab boss than there used to be, so he's not as critical as he used to be. But one of the ways to get past the Scarab boss was to make sure everyone has a shield up 100% of the time, and then just make sure you control his turn meter. It's a lot harder to do with Metal Shaper towards the end of Doom Tower, but early on Doom Tower, it's a very doable thing with Metal Shaper, and that is because Metal Shaper has a 2-turn shield on a 2-turn cooldown. Now, this shield is not large. In fact, it's a very bad shield, but it will keep the shield up for the Scarab boss and can be very, very useful in getting your team by. You know, the rest of his kit's okay. He's remove all debuffs from the ally with the lowest HP, then heals him by 20%. It's not bad for keeping people alive, keeping that cleanse up as well. He's got an A1 that can steal a random buff from the target if you build him with accuracy. Honestly, you build him with a little bit of general HP, and as fast as you can get him to go, ideally the fastest on your team or one of the fastest on your team, and he will keep a shield up pretty much indefinitely against the boss, which is really what you're hoping for the Scarab boss early on. He's not a great rare, and so if you can avoid getting him past 50, that's fine, but he needs, you know, he only needs a bunch of books. But if you can get lucky and get just these 4 books in him, you'll have the champion you need for the Scarab boss early on. You're just going to have to really, really crank the speed up to make sure that he's fast enough to be able to get that shield up constantly. Now, Gnarlhorn is probably the one you're going to hear talked about with the Skinwalkers, amazingly enough, but Tolog is certainly a really, really good rare as well. I've actually been really happy with him. I actually like him better than the epic reviver Hoffreeze in this faction because he's got a heal and increased defense on all allies for 2 turns. Now, this is the small increased defense, but that's still free damage mitigation, and in some cases it's also damage boost for defense-based champions like Rosin, who's a free accessible fusion. That's a 30% damage boost for him, so that's pretty cool. Continuous heal on all allies for 1 turn. Yeah, it could be 2 turns, but it's not too bad. You get to fund a 4-turn cooldown. It's not the greatest skill, but continuous heal could be very, very good. And again, increased defense of any kind, very, very helpful overall. Finally, he's got a revival here, 4-turn cooldown, 30% HP, 30% turn meter, and a 15% continuous heal on the revived ally. And then his A1 heals himself by 2% of his max HP on each hit. So he's constantly keeping himself alive. He's got ways to keep everyone else alive, possibly helping them stay alive even longer with the continuous heals. And if they do happen to die, well, you know, he's got the revive there as well. Plus, whenever a continuous heal buff placed by an ally by the Skinwalkers faction expires, is removed, or is stolen, places a 7.5 continuous heal buff on that ally for 1 turn. So these continuous heals that he's placing right here, so this one for 1 turn and this one for 1 turn, turn into a second smaller continuous heal for 1 turn afterwards. Plus, if you give him the ability to extend these with some masteries, if that means you're going to run masteries on Meat Carver, but you know what? If you need to do it, you need to do it. That means you might get several turns of healing out of this, and it's just, it's placed by an ally of the Skinwalkers faction, so it doesn't have to be him even placing it. He gives these extra continuous heals. It doesn't have to be on a Skinwalker. It just has to be placed by a Skinwalker. So he's overall got some very good healing utility. He's got a decent-ish revive. 4-turn cooldown is nice on a revive on a single target. Yes, it could be a better revive, but 4-turn cooldown for a single target revive on a rare, let alone an affinity rare, is pretty cool. And he's very accessible as an affinity rare. Hopefully you should be able to grab him. And if you do, I really recommend holding on to one, at least for Faction Wars Normal. On Faction Wars Normal, he is a good champion to bring you through Faction Wars Normal without a lot of investment. You know, I've got mine. Mine was at 5 stars. He had some okay gear. I think I got him at like 210 speed with some immortal gear on him, and that was enough to get me through Faction Wars. Going through to Orcs, I'm a bit of an impasse because honestly, there are not a lot of good rares here for the Orcs. I know Veteran was used occasionally for some stuff. Huntress can do some okay damage, but honestly, if you need an Orc rare to do something, if you get your Gallic, keep a Gallic. You don't necessarily need to heavily invest in him unless he is your starter, at which point in time he's a solid starter champion. Certainly the worst of the 4 starters, but that's not saying that he's a bad champion. Part of his problem is that he doesn't need books to get any faster. He's already got this at a 3-turn cooldown. This is just pure damage, and this is just pure damage and the ability to possibly land some better decreased defenses. He doesn't have a good chance to land decreased defense here anyway, so you don't need to book him, but as a starter champion, he gives you an aura in all battles of 15% for HP, which can be very useful for early on faction wars. He's got good base speed. He's actually got really good base speed. And he's got okay stats. He's not super tanky. He's got good attack. He's got okay defense, and he's fairly easy to build. You just build him for some damage. Plus, this has got the extra 15% chance of inflicting a critical hit, so if you can't get him to 100% crit rate, well, he'll still nuke with his AoE nuke, which does do some decent amount of damage. I like having rares available for factions. You know, early on, if you pull a Gallic, throw him in your Orc faction wars. Orcs is one of the more difficult factions to deal with just in general. I mean, there's a lot of really good epics for faction wars normal at least, and they need some better ones for hard. You know, as far as the rares are concerned, Gallic gives you some good utility, at least from a rare in the Orcs faction. Looking to start a brand new account in 2025 with Raid? Use my link down below, set up a new account with a brand new email, and you can start off with Elenarl, a wonderful legendary that can do all kinds of fun stuff for you. And at level 15, you'll also get a Tagore, a wonderful support reviver who has been a big carry for me on my accounts. You also use the code Demon Slayer to get Tholan as well, and to get Lemonisi at the moment, because Lemonisi is currently the free login champion. Start yourself off with 3 great legendaries and a wonderful epic, and enjoy starting a brand new raid journey in 2025. Demon Spawn actually have quite a few that are actually usable. Diabolus is actually not too bad. The farmable one you can get from 12-3. You've got Fellhound, who is certainly one of the best campaign farmers in the game if you're looking from a pure time standpoint. But I really like Marquess, and I think she is very underrated. The reason that she's underrated is she does require some investment in, because she is a damage dealer, and damage dealers do require investment in. A damage dealer wants to be a higher rank and a higher level, so you want them to be 50 minimum, maybe 60. They're going to then bring the pain, and what a lot of it is based off of is the fact that she has this chance to get a second hit with enemies under the weaken debuff. Now, if she places the weaken debuff, which she only has a 50% chance, 55 if you put sniper on her, of getting that weaken out herself, but this second hit is got like 3 times the multiplier of that first hit. It's absolutely huge. It's a huge nuke. I know there were videos back in 2022 comparing her damage dealing to Trunda, and they weren't doing it ironically. Now, we're not saying that that's going to be the best way to go. She's not going to be the best damage dealer in this faction, but early on, she could be a very good damage dealer. She can be a good damage dealer for faction wars, but because she actually is fairly good at bringing damage, and weaken is actually a really good debuff to be able to land to increase damage of everybody on the team, particularly early on, when weaken is one of the few ways to just increase damage flat out in general. And even if this is the weak version of weaken, it adds a lot of damage, and she's also really good in a couple of the secret rooms for rares. I think there's a rare, I don't know if there's a rare defense secret room, but there is a rare spirit secret room where she can be very helpful as a damage dealing champion in that room as well. But it's not just this ability that absolutely does smack. She also has a decent A1 single target nuke that does a 75% chance bookable to 100% chance to freeze for 1 turn. So she has a single target lockout as well. And then she's got a low level decrease attack here. She is very good, and she's a defense based damage dealer, which means she ends up being very tanky, because you can build her for defense and you get tankiness out of it in addition to damage out of it. And then finally, she does have a defense in Faction Crypts aura, which, you know what, in Faction Crypts early on, that's a great way to make sure that your champions stay alive, and it's better to have an aura than no aura in Faction Wars. Yeah, for undeads, I'm going with the obvious choice, but it's just a matter of Frozen Banshee is head and tails so much better than the other rares in undead. She is practically an epic in a rare skin, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that her stats decent-ish. They're not amazing. She's a little squishy, but she's got an okay defense. Her HP, I guess, is not as bad as some champions are. She's got an okay attack, so you can build her for some damage. She's got good speed, but for the most part, she's got the poison sensitivity, which is actually a hard skill to get. There's only a few champions champions that actually have this poison sensitivity. And then with that poison sensitivity, she'll put a bunch of poisons up on her A1. Double hitter has a 100% chance of putting poison up on each hit. She becomes one of the best single target poisoners in the game, putting up tons of poisons on this A1, as well as, of course, getting the poison sensitivity out, making those poisons worth that much more. She technically has this turn meter fill thing for each debuff on the enemy target, but honestly, her own AI doesn't even use this skill. It's really weird. For the most part, if poison sensitivity is out, she wants to get as much poisons as she can out there. You build her in the right gear, she can solo normal dragon, and possibly even hard dragon at the end. Probably not solo it, but she can certainly help for dragon. She also can solo ice golem particularly effectively at the end of it. Just gonna build some good regen gear on her as well, but she just puts out so many poisons, the boss just dies to poisons pretty quickly. Yeah, all you need is some accuracy and enough gear to make sure that she's surviving against some of these bosses, and she can put it down. She's also really, really good as a rare in a clan boss team. If you're struggling for other rares in clan boss teams, she is certainly a little less squishy than some of the starter champions, and she puts out so many poisons that as long as you don't have another poisoner on the team that's going to fill up the debuff bar, she can get, 4 poisons out there every 3 turns, which is pretty solid. And, overall, it makes her very useful. And if you've got things like ally attack with her as well, or she has some counterattack stuff, or she can counterattack because she's got gear, or you've got counterattack champion, that will add to the poisons that you can put out as well, making her that much more deadly against the clan boss as well. Now, Dark Elves was kind of hard to pick from because you've got Coldheart, who is arguably the best rare in the game, but that's the obvious choice, so I wasn't going to go with that. You've got Kale, who in my opinion is still the best starter in the game, mostly because he gives you help in Dragon, which is where you want to advance early, and he gives you help in Clan Boss better than any of the other champions, enough so that I think he's that much better than anybody else. Plus he gets some turn meter fill, which makes him actually better in Spider than the other starters as well. But Painkeeper, I think, is a woefully overlooked, really, really good champion. I still want one on my free-to-play because she brings so much healing with this A2. Heals allies based off of her max HP, which is almost 20k just for, being a rare. She's got really, really good speed for a rare, and she's got other stats as well. Now this does damage based on HP as well, so she actually gets a little bit of extra damage by doing HP, but she's not a damage champion. You build her for damage, and you have the problem of she needs every stat for damage. This needs HP and attack. This needs defense and attack. Now this fills her turn meter by 10%, so she gets around to other skills quickly, which is great. And she has this skill, which decreases the cooldowns of all ally skills by 1 turn. This skill can have its cooldowns other skills that reduce cooldowns by 1 turn. So this can slowly but surely get reset as well. You can build multiple Painkeepers, and there's a couple of teams that are actually pretty cool that are built around 3 Painkeepers, keeping the abilities cooldown properly tuned. So she can be very, very good for those teams. But even just as a general support in Faction Wars, this heal is chunky. She's super fast. She can be used in a couple of teams. She's actually useful in a lot of the man-eater teams to make the 5-turn cooldown into a 4-turn cooldown. So the skill cooldown reset's also really good as well. Just a really, really good champion overall. Because she gets around to her skills pretty quickly as well, you can even build her with a stun set. And this is a 4-turn cooldown, but she actually resets her own skill with this. So this ends up being about a 3-turn cooldown, which is pretty cool as well. Put her in a stun set. There you got an AoE in stun that also does healing. You build her for some damage. You get some damage out of her. You could do all kinds of cool things with your Painkeeper. For the most part, you're just going to want her fast, and she can make a lot of teams so much better, and it's really kind of hard to pinpoint exactly why. A lot of it is this skill, but the rest of it is this huge heal that she's got right here. And because she doesn't need the best gear in the game, she's actually fairly easy to gear. Now, we're talking about skill resets, and we get one of the OG masters of skill reset, and that's Renegade here. Back in the day, you had Kymar, and you had Renegade, and you had Painkeeper, and those were the only 3 people that manipulated skill cooldowns on your team. Now, Renegade is a rare, so it comes with some limits here. So decrease the cooldown of an ally skill by 2 turns. It's all ally skills. This skill does not affect this champion or other champions with this skill. So basically she can't reset other renegades. So you can't have 2 renegades resetting each other. She also receives 30% of their max HP damage, which can kill this champion. So you do have to be aware of that. And this skill cooldown cannot be reduced or reset. So this one's locked, much like Kymar's is locked. But for example, if you were building some of the old school Fire Knight speedrun teams that used to use Seer, would use a Renegade. And what you would do is you would have Seer nuke, and then Seer would do her A2, so she'd get out the increased crit rate and some more buffs and debuffs, and then Renegade would then reset, and that would be enough so that Seer would have her A3 big nuke available, and she would then nuke everybody down, and then you'd be at the boss. And it would take, 15 turns and like 30 seconds to get to. So nice, easy, good for some speed runs. But this is just a generally useful skill in so many situations, especially if you are struggling because you don't have a Kymar or you don't have a Yumiko. Renegade is easy to build for this. Now, because she cannot have her skill reset, she's not going to work in a lot of teams that are auto and self-resetting. So she can't be one of these champions that self-resets, unlike a Painkeeper, for example, that can reset, or a Yumiko that can reset herself, or one Yumiko can reset another Yumiko. So you can't build that with a Renegade, which is why she's still limited. But this is absolutely huge. But a lot of people forget her other skills. She's got a triple hitter with decreased speed, and this can be a very good decreased speed for Fire Knight if you're missing decreased speed at all. It's also good for getting the shield down. A triple hitter is nice. So in a Fire Knight team, she can be very good for some early speed runs before you get to Fire Knight hard. And decreased accuracy doesn't suck as well if you're going to start resisting some of these buffs on the Fire Knight as well. And then she's got heal reduction on the A1. That can be useful against a bunch of different enemies. Heck, you could certainly bring her against Amius if you're really, really low on heal reduction. It's only one turn, and it only has a 40% chance of landing. So it's not the greatest skill in the world, but again, for a rare, she brings a lot of good utility almost entirely with this skill. And mostly you just need to get her in the right speed and make sure that she lives long enough to use this skill the first time you need it from her. Now, if you've watched the show here before, or my channel, or whatever you want to call it, I have gushed about Avir the Alchemage a couple of times beforehand. I love this dude, probably due to the fact he was one of the rares that I invested heavily in early on my main account when I was still learning the game, and he was so good. Part of what makes him good, he's got poisons on the A1, which, never hurts. It's not a huge chance, 30% chance, bookable to 45. Rare books are not too hard to get to until you get into the late game, and then they become actually amazingly hard. It's really weird. But poison, very, very good to have, can be useful in clan boss, can be useful against bosses, can be useful all over the place. It's only one poison, but it's, it's a usable A1, which is great. Got an A2, which is decreased attack and decreased speed. That is very, very useful. Now, the decreased speed's only against targets under poison, but if you have more poison around, you can get that decreased speed up there, so that's definitely good to have. And decreased attack is great, even if it's the low version of decreased attack. So it books up to, 100% actually too. So it's a 50% chance bookable to 100%. Good ability. I mean, again, not great, but we're talking rares here. And the AoE attack is nice. You can build him for some damage. You don't have to though. He's probably not really a big damage dealer. In fact, if you look at him over here, he's more of a support with defense and speed and HP. But finally, what makes him really nice is a turn meter boost. So 15% turn meter and a 15% heal of this champion's max HP, which means you load this dude up with a ton of max HP. You book this down to 4 turns and you get a chunky 15% turn meter boost and a 15% heal. And that can be so good in so much content as an early game player. Makes him very, very good. He is usable as one of the better healers in the game for the dwarves who don't have an awful lot of healing. So if you are desperate for healing and need to build a dwarf, Avir could certainly be a good option for you as well. But he just brings a good amount of utility. He's certainly usable in some interesting secret rooms. And overall, I just really like this dwarf overall. There are better rares out there, but we're talking about rares that can provide you some pretty good utility. Now, honestly, I've been fairly disappointed with a lot of the Shadowkin rares. They're okay, but the Shadowkin rares are actually just kind of missing that special oomph champion that I've been looking for in some of these other factions. But Red Cloak is probably the best one they've come out with recently. She was a recent fusion rare, and I say recent, I think it was about a year ago at this point in time. But she is actually really, really good because she brings some interesting turn meter control mechanics onto her. So you've got a remove 1 random buff from each enemy, so that's actually nice to have a strip on a rare for buffs, 4 turn cooldown, and this is 100%. And then a 50% chance, bookable to 75, of placing a 15% decreased speed buff on all enemies for 2 turns. Decreased speed is so good, especially early on when you struggle to get more speed. So a 15% decreased speed basically means for the next turn and a half, they are moving 15% slower. So you're going to get 15% more turn meter fill over them that you might have not gotten otherwise. So that is so huge. But she also has an AoE attack, which is always good. Places increased accuracy on all allies for 2 turns. So 25%, but it's still an increased accuracy. Again, early on, that's good. And that's on everybody. And then also it's a 50% chance of decreasing the turn meters of all enemies by 15%. 9%. So you've got buff cleanse, you've got decreased speed, you've got an AoE attack, you've got increased accuracy, and you've got turn meter decreasing. And then she's got an A1 here that steals turn meter. So she actually does a bunch of turn meter manipulation that can be very, very helpful early on. And I honestly, one of the better Shadowkin rares that we have seen. And honestly, I forgot how good she was. And I didn't notice how good she was until I needed a rare for my Faction Wars team on my free-to-play. And when I grabbed her and started building her, it became very obvious that she was better than some of the epics that I had been using just in the Shadowkin in general. And very, very good champion. Does okay damage as well, but generally not tanky. She is a defense-based damage dealer as well. So building her with high defense means she's going to be tanky as well as possibly do some extra damage as well. And all that turn meter control, manipulation, stealing means she's going to be going pretty often and make sure the enemy team is not taking turns. And that's a great way to win in Raid Shadow Legends. And finally, we have the Sylvan Watchers. The Sylvan Watchers have two amazing ones in Tree Shield Knot and Bowsmith Flannan. Now, Tree Shield Knot's a reviver, and I've talked about revivers before. I've talked about a lot of Void champions in this. So to not talk about another Void champion, I'm going to gush on Bowsmith Flannan because this dude is absolutely amazing. He's got an A1 here that can stun, a 25% chance bookable to 40% chance of placing stun on each hit. So he's got a better than 50% chance of getting a stun off with the A1 on a rare. That's huge. Has a 35% chance, bookable to 50% chance of decreasing turn meter by 5% on each hit as well. These are additive. So you could get the stun and 10% turn meter decrease. Targets under decreased speed, champion decreased turn meters 10% instead. Now he puts decreased speed because of course this wouldn't make any sense if he didn't, but AoE, decreased speed, 75% chance, bookable to 100, 4 turn cooldown, bookable to 3, defense-based damage dealing here. He is a defense-based champion, and look at that, almost 1,400, almost, and look at that, almost 1,400 defense. That is huge amount of defense. He's got a good amount of speed. He's got good HP. He doesn't need the attack because he's not an attack-based champion, so the attack doesn't matter. This is a huge, huge ability, but it gets better. He's got a single target ally attack, which means you get this A1 on his A3 and some other random allies A1 as well, but it puts increased accuracy on everybody as well. Increased accuracy is so helpful in the early game, and this can be very useful for getting through the shield. This is a double hitter for Fire Knight, so with turn meter control, so he can be a good Fire Knight champion on normal for you for quite a long time on your account, partially because he'll have the ally attack, which will get extra stuff, partially because this A1 is going to be great, and again, decreased speed. He is a Fire Knight beast. And then finally, we've also got a passive, 3 turn cooldown when booked, 50% chance of getting an extra turn if he places decreased speed on 3 or more enemies with this skill. So he can do a 3 turn cooldown AoE nuke with decreased speed and get an extra turn out of it if he lands enough decreased speeds, which he should have a good chance of landing if you booked him and built him with some accuracy, which you probably should do. So this turn dude can get back to his turn regularly. He is so great for wave clear. If you want to stick him in a stun set, you can make do even more with all those stuns. He is such a good utility champion. I've got him, I only 5-starred him on my free-to-play, but he was one of the first champions I brought to 5 stars on my free-to-play, and he was so critical in me advancing to all kinds of places very early on, and I still use him on my Faction Wars team because he's so critical, and I liked him so much I built 2 of them on my main. 2 of them. Because for some of the Centrano secret rooms, he is so critical. But all the turn meter control, all the stunnage, and the ally attacks he brings so much control, as well as some damage, that he can be very useful in any wave-based content where he's usable. And that makes him an MVP rare. So there we go. That was hopefully me in rare form. We were talking about some rare topics that, need to be discussed. People rarely talk about so many different champions like this. Oftentimes they're talking about your epics and your legendaries, but rares deserve some love, even if, you're only beginning using them for a little while in the early game. But plenty of these rares can be viable for you in the late game, in the end game, in certain situations. And it's kind of nice to have your rounded out roster of some of these wonderful champions. And some of these ones, they're only gonna be useful for a little while and fall off. And some of these rares are gonna be so useful that you will be using them even on accounts 3 or 4 years into the game. So, hey, let me know down below, did I find some of your favorite rares? If you didn't post earlier, do that. And I appreciate it. If you like videos like that, hit that like button and hit that subscribe button. You guys are one of the most most amazing communities in gaming, and I absolutely love you. Much love, everyone. Have an absolutely wonderful day. And until the next video, I am Bront CatHerder.